Welcome to Chapter 41. America confronts the post-Cold War era. Today we're going to be talking about Bill Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton, the guy who came out of nowhere out of Arkansas to win the 1992 election after George Bush seemed so popular after the Persian Gulf War and the end of the Cold War. It just seemed unfathomable that he could lose re-election. But Bill Clinton, the first baby boomer president, the first president that was from that generation that followed the greatest generation. George Bush was from the greatest generation. The U.S. was the lone superpower after the fall of the Soviet Union. So we're talking about 1992 here. My freshman year of high school, a very awkward time for me, but it was an interesting time historically for the United States and the world. We were the shining superpower, and some people decided they didn't really like us. The 90s were an interesting time. Contrary to popular belief, people do remember the 90s, not just 90s kids remember the 90s. It was a fun time. You had grunge music with Nirvana, you had gangster rap and all that stuff. Unfortunately, you had the rise of Garth Brooks, which my ears are still bleeding from that stuff, but we move on. Clinton claimed to be a new Democrat. Like I said, he was the governor of Arkansas. He formed the Democratic Leadership Council to give the party a new platform. The Democrats had only held the presidency for 4 years since 1968, since LBJ left office. Was 69 technically. I mean, you had the 4 years of Jimmy Carter, which, like we said, he was a really nice guy. Maybe didn't achieve enough as a president. And so the Democrats were looking to try to get back into the swing of things. And Clinton formed his Democratic Leadership Council to kind of form a new platform to appeal to a broader base of Americans and hopefully regain the White House. Um, Excuse me, I clicked the wrong button. He was accused during his campaign of being a womanizer, a draft dodger, and even a marijuana user. He had grown up in the 60s. He had idolized John F. Kennedy. He did not serve in Vietnam, even though he was at the age he should have. He was a Rhodes Scholar, a very brilliant young man. But Clinton's kind of a sly guy, never gave a real definite issue about the draft dodging. With the marijuana thing, they asked him if he ever tried marijuana during the 60s, and he said, I was at a party once and I did try it, but I did not inhale because I knew it was bad. And people believed him that he just tried it out to look cool and never actually inhaled the marijuana. But that's besides the point. Uh, Clinton ran with the Tennessee governor Al Gore, Al Gore that supposedly invented the internet, running against George H.W. Bush and his vice president Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle is famous for misspelling the word potato in front of a class of elementary school kids. That's about all people remember about Vice President Quayle. The election probably would have been a slam dunk for George Bush if it wasn't for this little Texas billionaire with a bad haircut, oil tycoon H. Ross Perot. Clinton was energetic, he was articulate, he was charismatic, he was hip, he went on MTV, he went on the Arsenio Hall show, he appealed to young voters. And he seemed like he was in touch with the youth of America, whereas Bush was kind of the old guard and seemed out of touch. Bush ran on his foreign policy record, which was substantial. He has a great foreign policy record, which we chronicled in the last chapter. But the economic recession really took its toll, especially with the 7% and climbing unemployment rate. And so people just wanted a balanced budget. They didn't want any more deficit, and they wanted jobs. They wanted the economy to thrive. And so this little Texas businessman, Ross Perot, now see, I was in Texas and I made billions of dollars as a billionaire, and I could fix the economy just a little bit of here. He said, day to day, and you cut some taxes here, and you got the problem. See, that's what we do. Now listen to me. And people are like, hey, I like this guy. He threw out obscure Southern references that people don't understand. If you put a raccoon in a barn and set it on fire, I'll give you a pie. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And people went, sure. But the economic thing was there was such an urgency to it that people bought into what Ross Perot was saying, but it was confusing because one, he wasn't on the ballot in most states. So they had to petition the government, which is your First Amendment right, to get him on the ballot. And then he said, I'm not running. Never mind. And people went, oh, come on, Ross Perot. And then he said, oh, okay, I'll run. And then they were collecting signatures again. And then he got cold feet. Oh, I guess I'm not running. Whatever. Yeah, we'll get a bad haircut. And then he decided to run again, and he was very popular in a lot of conservative states, including Colorado, I believe, and I don't remember the exact totals, but I believe he either won or nearly won Garfield County in 1992. So he claimed he could clean up the economic mess, fix the deficit, fix the debt, and that appealed to voters. The reason it's significant is it took enough votes away from George Bush that enabled Bill Clinton to win on election day. Clinton only got 43% of the popular vote, so less than half of Americans actually voted for William Jefferson Clinton, or Slick Willie as he was known. Bush got 38% of the vote, and Perot got 19%, which was the strongest third-party showing since Roosevelt in 1912. If you add 38 and 19 together, you get 57%, and then those were really conservative voters. Perot picked off mainly conservative Republican voters. Bush probably could have won in a landslide, but Ross Perot, I'm not sure if George Bush was his mortal enemy for the rest of his life, but because of it, George Bush was a one-term president, and you get the first baby boomer president, Bill Clinton. Uh, Democrats also won clear majorities in both houses of Congress, and so start of the decade, we had the Republicans, and now the rest of the decade for the 90s, the Democrats are largely in control. The White House for sure. Congress does shift back in 1994. We'll get to that. So you can watch funny videos of Ross Perot if you want. The electoral map is very interesting to look at. It's different than most. Bill Clinton won Colorado, which for Democrats at that time, all through the 20th century, it was, it was a rarity that the Democrats would win our state. I know LBJ won it in 64, but that was a landslide. But we were a stronghold of republicanism for a long time. And many of those middle states there that you see in red went to Clinton. Bush normally would have won them, but Ross Perot with that substantial, nearly 19% of the electoral vote, not enough to get any popular vote, excuse me, not enough to get any of the electoral vote, really kind of swung the election in favor of Bill Clinton. There's Bill Clinton, a picture of Bill Clinton with Jay-Z playing saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show, meeting his idol, John F. Kennedy. In fact, he adopted many of the same mannerisms and apparently maybe a little bit of the womanizing. And then there's Bill Clinton on the MTV, the Choose or Lose campaign that they used to do. Some people have claimed that Bill Clinton was the first black president. I think that was published in some magazines back in the 90s. Bill Clinton. His wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton, is also very famous. He thought he had a strong mandate, that people wanted him to do his thing, which, remember, he only had 43% of the nation that actually voted for him. So that's not a mandate of the people. So he struggled early in his first term to really kind of, get his feet wet and be grounded in what he wanted to do. He advocated for the repeal of the don't ask, don't tell policy in the military, which was, they used to allow gays in the military as long as they didn't say they were gay. He wanted them to be able to join if they were open about it. His wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who is the current presidential nomination for the Democrats, advocated for a national health care system, something that's been a dream of the Democratic Party since Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal, and she really pushed it. She became the spokeswoman for it. He appointed her the director of a task force to explore the issue, and it was just too expensive. America wasn't ready for it, and Congress did not pass it in 1993. And many people didn't like Hillary Clinton because of that. And they felt that she overstepped her bounds as first lady. She was more in line with like an Eleanor Roosevelt in terms of using her position for influence and to help the president. By the way, healthcare was achieved by President Obama, which is either loathed or hated or loved. I don't know if it's loved by anyone with Obamacare. He did balance the budget. The deficit went away. He increased revenues. The economy was strong, very strong. In fact, the economy of the 1990s is probably the best in the 20th century besides the 50s. By 1998, the government had a surplus. We were making more money than we were spending, and they actually paid the debt down a little bit, which is astonishing compared to what George W. Bush has done. And now Barack Obama in 16 years of the 20th century, they have just spent. And it's not just them, it's also Congress. There were some problems going on. The Oklahoma City bombing was the worst act of domestic terrorism in our history on April 19th, 1995. killing 168 people. A van full of explosive exploded, taking out the federal building in Oklahoma City. Sadly, there was a daycare across the street or nearby that killed many children, which is very tragic. This was done in retribution for the violent standoff in Waco, Texas, where they took out the FBI took out the Branch Davidians, which was a cult led by David Koresh, who believed he was Jesus. In terms of violent standoff, and many people were killed. And so this was an attack and retaliation of that. It was um, it was done by Timothy McVeigh, who was executed for his actions. He was actually tried in Denver because he couldn't get a fair trial in Oklahoma City. Terry Nichols went to jail for life over this. And like I said, it was the worst act of domestic terrorism in our history in 1995. The violence brought to light the dangers of private militias, and that was kind of a big deal that there were a lot of militias being formed in the 90s. For whatever reason, whenever Democrats control the White House, gun sales go up in this country. So if you own a gun shop, you want the Democrats to win. They're not going to take your guns. You're just going to sell a lot more of them. In 1994, Clinton's early struggles and an anti-government feeling paved the way for the Republicans to kind of retake Congress in 1994. They came up with this thing called the Contract with America, and they had this big giant poster, and they had all these things they were going to pass, and all these candidates from across the country, congressional candidates for the House of Representatives, for the Senate, signed this Contract with America, and they pledged to get it done. It struck a chord with voters. The leader of this was Newt Gingrich, and they won control of Congress. He was actually elected the Speaker of the House because of it. And it was the first time since 1954 the Republicans controlled both houses of Congress. And they thought they're going to get all this stuff done, but they kind of forgot there's a Democratic president who had the power to veto. And so a lot of the things that the Contract of America with America was supposed to do didn't get done because of Bill Clinton's veto power or the threat of a veto. They did pass a welfare reform bill, and interestingly, they passed a line item veto, which gave the president the power to pass a bill by but while striking out just certain clauses of it. He could go through and cross off pages or lines certain and still pass the rest of the bill, which was a fascinating thing. It could cut out wasteful spending, earmarks, some of these things that kind of plague bills, and they get monumental and huge, but the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional because it's not in the original Constitution. It takes an amendment to give the president that power. Clinton stayed the course, though, while Americans grew weary of the conservative tide. They kind of realized it was just a lot of flag waving and talk and not a lot of action. In fact, the standoff was so bad the government shut down in 1995. They didn't finalize the budget. They closed everything except essential functions of the government. National parks were closed, and it just kind of showed the division politically in this country, and it's kind of a preview of what's come in the 20th century. In 1996, Bill Clinton, with the economy humming, easily defeated Kansas Senator Bob Dole. Bob Dole's from Russell, Kansas, right in the middle of the state, middle of nowhere. World War II veteran who was wounded and had some injuries with his hand, but Clinton defeated him very easily. The Republicans kept control of Congress, but with Clinton still there, it meant not a lot was going to get done. The economy was humming. This is the birth, the dawn of the internet. I'll never forget my senior year, our English teacher showing us this thing called the internet. We had no idea what you could do with it. We just thought you could get free music and didn't understand that it was stealing. But this is the dot-com boom. You get AOL that comes out, Yahoo was born, and the internet was just starting to take off, and people were trying to figure out how you can make money with this. And it was really a hard sell for some people. They didn't, they realized it's difficult to make money. You had to be pretty savvy with business. The 90s was the longest sustained growth in American history. And it was a good time economically. Like I said, jobs were plentiful, and people made a lot of money. Clinton helped create the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, which was a free trade zone between us, Mexico, and Canada, hopefully to rival the European Union. That trade zone had grown substantially in the late 20th century, and it rivaled us, and it threatened to hurt our economy. And so NAFTA was created by Bill Clinton, opposed by Ross Perot, who went on Larry King and just ranted and raved and did his his Ross Perot stuff. They're very kind of funny to watch. He also promoted the creation of the World Trade Organization to promote further free trade agreements. The WTO is still around today. Some of the problems of broad relative peace during the Clinton administration. They didn't have a clear foreign policy after the years of anti-communist positions. Not really sure what we're supposed to do. Are we supposed to be the police of the world? Are we supposed to just, send money to people? He sent troops to help keep peace in troubled areas. Sadly, dozens of Americans were killed in Somalia in 1994 as a part of a peacekeeping, venture to help deliver food to people who were starving. Warlords were there trying to steal the food and all that stuff. America, though, turned a blind eye when violence erupted in Rwanda and Uganda, when the Hutus and the Tutsis went to war, and the Hutus tried to slaughter the Tutsis. And people claimed that we were racist because we didn't get involved there. And it is interesting that America didn't do much there. He worked for a full trade agreement with the Chinese in 2000, which has led to substantial trade with that nation. The Balkan region, with the fall of Yugoslavia and the death of Tito, was embroiled in civil war. There was ethnic cleansing going on in Bosnia where they're trying to get rid of all the Muslims. And so it was really an ugly thing. They were forcing refugees out. They were slaughtering people. And this was all perpetrated by the guy in the photograph there, Slobodan Milosevic. Which, if you're going to name a bad guy for a James Bond movie or something, Slobodan Milosevic sounds like a really good name for that. Slobodan Milosevic. NATO forces were sent there from 95 to 99. There was airstrikes in the Balkan regions, in Bosnia and Serbia, and places like that. It's not a major engagement. We're there in support services. Slobodan Milosevic was eventually arrested and put on trial for war crimes. He stepped up the killings in Kosovo because of the NATO forces, and like I said, he was arrested in 2001, where I believe he died in prison. NATO launched an air war because of this. Other problems. Peace in the Middle East was still difficult. Where Jimmy Carter had succeeded in the Camp David Accords, he had failed in terms of bringing lasting peace between the Arab nations and Israel. To this point, Israel was still a thorn in a lot of the Palestinian sides for sure, because they never got the country they were promised by the United Nations in 1948. But Clinton did get Yitzhak Rabin, who was the leader of Israel, and Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestinians, to sign an agreement to allow some Palestinian rule in Israel in 1993. It was the first agreement ever between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and people thought, all right, this is going to be it. And it's a very eerily similar scene to the Camp David Accords from the 70s, and the same thing kind of played out, not lasting peace. The leaders of Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization of the PLO signed these two. Sadly, Rabin was killed in 1995. Yasser Arafat ruled. They helped the Palestinians for a long time. People were upset with him, though. They didn't think that they should have signed this agreement. He also tried to work for peace in Northern Ireland, in Korea, in India, and Pakistan, and didn't get it done. But it's not a tremendous time when there's a lot of war going on. There is violence, of course, but the United States is not directly involved during the Clinton administration. Clinton's lasting legacy, besides the strong economy, of course, is the scandal and the impeachment. He's the second president, one of two presidents in our history to ever be impeached. The first is Andrew Johnson, because he violated the Tenure of Office Act. And the second was Bill Clinton. Remember, Richard Nixon was, they were drawing up the articles of impeachment over Watergate. He resigned before he was officially impeached. Remember the definition of impeach. It means to formally charge. It's like a government term for indict. The House of Representatives has the power to impeach in our country. The Senate then puts the president on trial, and they need a two-thirds majority to remove the president. So the whole thing was accused of some corruption of a real estate deal in Arkansas called Whitewater Affair. And during that, he testified, and somehow during the testimony, it came up. They had an intern named Monica Lewinsky, and they asked him if he had a relationship with her, and he testified he did not, on a totally separate scandal. The Clintons have always been kind of up to some shady things, I think. So Whitewater is being investigated. Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General, appointed Kenneth Starr to investigate They kind of what's going on here? What's going on with the Clintons? They're kind of doing some things that maybe clouded with some illegality. In 1998, an affair with the intern Monica Lewinsky led to this scandal, and Starr he still had authority to investigate. Word leaked out that Clinton had lied under oath about his affair with Monica Lewinsky. The problem is they didn't have evidence of it, but through the investigations, they found out that Monica Lewinsky had described her encounter with the president with her friend Linda Tripp, and that there possibly might be a infamous blue dress that may or may not have had DNA from the president. Well, we're trying to keep this clean here. Clinton was accused of perjury and obstruction of justice. He famously went on TV here with his wife behind him, and she looks very happy with him, and said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. And he was upset by it. And then several months later, after the testimony and the investigation, Bill Clinton went on television and said, I did have sexual relations with that woman, and it was wrong. But being this sly fox, the politician he was, he testified directly about this, and they asked him, what is your relationship with Monica Lewinsky? And he looked at him with steely eyes and just a cold demeanor and said, that depends on what your definition of is. And they went, what? It's two letters and it's really hard to define. And so, I mean, they went through the whole thing. This drug on for nearly 2 years. The president was impeached. Hillary Clinton, people thought, should leave him because he had cheated on her. But she stayed by his side. I'm not sure they have a very loving relationship. So he was impeached for the Lewinsky affair. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details. You're young adults, you can read them yourself. It was fun to hear newsmen of the day describing some of the antics in the White House. It was rather comical. In December 1998, the House impeached Clinton on 2 counts. He was found not guilty of both, of perjury and obstruction of justice, and he kept his job and served the rest of his presidency. Looking back, it seems like a whole lot of hubbub over not much. But, who knows with Hillary running for president and Bill potentially being the first man, first gentleman, first dude. All right, I'm back. Who knows what people are going to think. Interestingly, the White House portrait, the official White House portrait of Clinton there on the left in this picture, the painter hung a dress up and had the shadow of a blue dress on the White House mantle. It could kind of show that Clinton, for all his confidence and everything, it's just still the shadow of the affair. The top right picture is Monica Lewinsky, who was young and she's admitted to making a mistake, and Bill Clinton. And then you have a caricature, a painting in Clinton with an Uzi, and who knows, the internet, they just come up with wild stuff. Next time we're going to talk about the end of the Clinton administration and the election of George W. Bush. Thank you. Bye.